You're watching Las Vegas One, news and information 24/7.
Do you know the candidates in the races for district court? If you don't, you're not alone. Who will survive the primary election on Tuesday? We'll meet some hopefuls. Plus, hundreds of prospective condo owners in Trump Las Vegas want their money back. They say they didn't get what they were promised. But is the real issue here the lack of financing for high-rise condos? We'll ask their attorney next on Face to Face.
Tough questions, direct answers. This is Face to Face with John Ralston.
Welcome to Face to Face. I'm John Ralston. Family court judges make some of the most difficult decisions, and yet little is often known about the candidates running for the posts. We hope to change that right here on Face to Face. Later, we'll meet two hopefuls for a seat on the family court bench. But first, Attorney Ben Easterlin joins me. He represents prospective buyers of 300 condo units in Trump, Las Vegas. His clients want some $40 million in deposits returned. He's demanding arbitration of the purchase contracts, and he's also asking the state to revoke an exemption it granted to Donald Trump. We wanted to talk to someone from the Trump organization, but no takers. And I couldn't believe we couldn't get the Donald to come on the program. But Mr. Easterlin, we appreciate your making the trip. Thanks for coming on.
Glad to do it, John.
All right, let's talk about this case. You know, there's been a lot of reports here and elsewhere about the foreclosure crisis, problems for financing in housing, et cetera. Isn't that what this is really all about, is what people are asking? We had a condo expert on this station, and here's what he had to say about financing drying up for these kinds of projects.
A client that could have closed on the unit with 20-25% down payment, maybe 30% max, is now asked by the same bank to come up with 45% to 50%, at times double of what he has already in escrow and had in escrow for 2 or 3 years perhaps. And not only that, he's also now proposed a loan that's, instead of 6 or 7% interest, it's a 9, 10, 11% interest.
So explain to the viewers, Mr. Easterlin, why this isn't just a case of people making a deal when times are good, and now times are not so good, now they're just upset.
Well, let me clarify first for you, John, that all the purchases at Trump Tower signed sales contracts that had arbitration clauses in them. And those arbitration clauses contain a provision that says that the arbitration proceedings are confidential. So as much as I would love to, as long as that provision is unresolved, and there's a dispute about the scope of it, but as long as that's unresolved, as a matter of principle, I really cannot talk about the specifics of any arbitration.
Let's not talk about the arbitration at all, but what about the point that I'm just asking you about, and you heard Mr. Murad there making, I mean, so they made some deals when times were good, looked like a great investment, now the economy's soured and they're upset.
And I'm sure that that's the case, and there's no question that the loans have dried up for a lot of people. But there are all sorts of different situations. We're talking about across Las Vegas. You're talking about literally thousands of people with many different circumstances. It depends on those particular circumstances, what was represented to them, what they got, whether the particular unit they obtained is worth what they paid for it, and that affects the financing. There are just all sorts of things that don't have anything necessarily to do with the Trump Tower claims themselves, but have to do with all claims and all of these kind of, but it would be naive and it would be wrong to not acknowledge that there's some people who simply just aren't going to get the loan or don't want to. But I don't believe that that's the majority of the situation.
But there certainly would be people who, and a lot of people might be behaving this way, not just in this case. They made these deals and then suddenly these things aren't going so well. Hire a lawyer and say, what can you find to help me get my money back, right? I mean, that's essentially what occurs.
Well, that's what occurs in almost all consumer litigation, because most consumers are pretty much at the mercy of the more sophisticated person they're dealing with, and they go to the lawyer and they say, okay, I feel like I've been mistreated, make something out of this. And lawyers then look at the law and they look at what took place and they say, well, this person that you dealt with didn't follow this statute, or they misled you in this way, and we can make something out of it, and we can save the unfortunate situation you find yourself in. And please be aware that all across Las Vegas and all of these investments, that there are many, many people who saw this as their one chance in life to maybe get off the ground, get some sort of security. They took the child's college education money. They took a second mortgage on their house just to try to get their foot in the door. And some of those people have legitimate claims to get their money back. Some do not.
There's some very sad stories across Las Vegas. We've done some with other condo projects too. You essentially filed this complaint with the state, the real estate division, and there are allegations in there. And I wish someone from Trump was here to talk about this too. But the one that really struck me is one I want to talk about, in which you talked about Trump's failure to adequately disclose information about the condo units. There's this specific state requirement that says, as opposed to what the state's requirement is of an inspection of a specific unit or lot, Trump's form, this is a form that they asked them to sign, merely acknowledges an inspection of a, quote, a lot, which is generally located somewhere on an empty space on the Frontier Hotel property. Under no reasonable logic can this document be considered an affirmation that a consumer has actually viewed and inspected what he or she is committing to purchase. Now, it's obvious why that's in the law. They have to be allowed to go and see exactly what they're buying, not just some description of it. I bet you think it was intentional that they put a general rather than a specific description in there.
Oh, there's no question about it. This particular statute is a consumer protection statute. It's a statute that says anybody that's going to develop a subdivision or condominium or condo hotel of any size has to do certain things to protect the interest of the purchasers. For instance, there are basically three things that I would focus on. One is that they have to register with the states and give the state a lot of financial information so the state knows that this is not some fly-by-night operation and they'll be able to follow through. Secondly, they've got to affirm to the state that they're going to allow the people to see what they're getting before they commit to buy it. And then thirdly, that they are prohibited from drafting up a sales contract that has a clause in it that says that there were no representations made to me that are not in this document, so that if they do get in a dispute, they can't go to court or to an arbitration and say, well, this was a representation or this was a misrepresentation that was made to me.
Real quickly, because we are running out of time, but basically none of these people could have ever seen these actual lots, but they signed these things with that essentially says nothing. I generally know that this is being built there somewhere there on this road, right?
Well, worse than that, the state exempted Trump from complying with the statute on his representation that he would show people plans and specs and get them to sign a form that said that they saw that, and the state said that'll substitute for an on-site inspection.
Is that because he was Donald Trump, you think he got that?
You'll have to ask the state that, but I question whether the statute allows that. But whether it does or not, the problem here is Trump didn't do what he represented to the state he would do.
Even after he got the exemption, he didn't even do that. He didn't even do the lesser of what he was asked to do.
We're saying to the state, ask the Trump Tower people to present to you the forms that were signed by 1,000 or so people that said that they looked at those plans and knew what they were getting. And I don't think you'll get it. Anyway, if you do, we're wrong. If he doesn't have those documents, we're right. And the question is, will the state step up to the plate and revoke this exemption? And it's important because what Trump turned around and did was put a contract out that had the provision that this law says you cannot have.
It's a very fascinating case. We're going to look forward to seeing it resolved. Thanks for coming and talking about it, sir.
You're certainly welcome.
And when we come back, we're going to switch gears and give you some information about a couple of candidates running for the family court bench, only on Face to Face.